All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. Well, in this conversation, ambition versus biology, we are going to be discussing all about the collisions that women are rarely warned about. You know, when at different stages of life, health, fertility, your ambition, your career, everything intersects at the same time. And who better than Ameera, who's been heading, a pharmaceutical, healthcare business at large, is going to be helping us understand how to navigate all of those pressures and continue to be on your own path and your own dreams as well. Ameera, help us understand. Have you ever faced, a tough choice where you had to make a decision and which cost something or either on your professional or on your personal life when it came to ambition versus biology?
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. It was so good to see you, all of you, and so many new faces. So really excited to see so many more women and so many men in the audience, by the way. Very happy about that, too. But, I think when we put the question of work-life balance, or we put the question of ambition versus biology, you're almost positioning it like it has to be one or the other, right? And obviously, the ideal state scenario is where you can have it all, you can do them both, and you can carry on with life. I was sharing with her actually that BT is very dear to my heart because I've come here as a single woman many times. I came here as a married woman many times. I came here when I was pregnant with my first child to this event. I came pregnant with my 2 other babies in my tummy once. And last year I brought my son. Right? And so it's been such a long journey of being, part of BT events. And why this is relevant is because every one of these choices along the journey has been a conscious choice. It's been a thought. You're always trading off something, right? There's nothing in life that we're not trading off. If I'm choosing to be here at this event today, I'm giving up dinner with my son tonight, right? All of us are. We're giving up something to be here. But when we make those choices consciously versus unconsciously, I think that's the best control we can have of our lives, to say, both need to fill me, both are important. When do I balance what? How do I prioritize the other? And the challenge, obviously, for women is that there are so many more of these milestones in our lives than there probably are in men's lives, that they're more visible, they're more apparent when we have to take blocks of time away. Whether it's when it's, you're, maybe not when you're pregnant, but maybe when you're breastfeeding. Maybe when you have a crisis and you need to take rest when you're pregnant. There are so many of these situations. Men face them too. They're just not in these chunks of time. For example, men tend to have a bigger addiction gene than women. So a lot of times you see men more with alcoholic addiction or some other addiction. Now, they may not be gone for 3 months at a time, but they're probably struggling with it every day. That also leads to non-productive behavior or non-productive time in the workforce, but that's non-quantifiable. With women, the challenge is we have these blocks, and I think that's the reason it becomes so apparent.
So I know that Ameera and I have been having this conversation for the last decade. Maneuvering choices and options and the ways of the world. But Ameera, would you say that women today have more choices, whether they want to do IVF, surrogacy, adopt, and do you think that has perhaps made it easier for them to be a little bit more independent, to make a choice as to whether or not they want to delay that journey into motherhood, choose their career, perhaps for the next 5 years when it's critical for them? And do you think that some of these choices help?
Of course they help. I mean, the last time we had a path-breaking time was when they invented the birth control pill. It brought agency to women, right? The ability to make your own choices. And honestly, egg freezing, IVF, is that second round of fantastic innovation that puts it back in the woman's hands. There was a time when, it was out of our control. It just happened whenever it did. And you had no way of navigating life. I think the fact today, and it was my own situation, and Sakshi knows this. When I was 32 and I realized that my AMH level, and AMH is the hormone where you do your check for your number of eggs. And I found that my AMH was falling. I immediately went and did egg and embryo freezing. Because I said, look, I'm not ready to have kids today. I'm not in that circumstance, but I want to have the option in life. I don't want to be 40 when I decide to have kids and then not have the alternative. And I was 40 when I had my first child, and thankfully I had the option to use my eggs and my embryos, right? So I think having that power to choose is just phenomenal. And it makes your choices for your work so much easier.
Do you think that perception for women, once they do take on motherhood or are going through a certain phase in their lives does change when it comes to their male counterparts and how they're perceived in the business world. And I ask because you've always been a go-getter, so I'm asking a controversial question, but but I'm just asking for, you know, what is the reality? Are they somewhere dismissed already, knowing that, okay...
I'll give you my my own anecdotes, right? And, you know, all of us women here, I don't know whether you guys, I know certainly when I've gone for meetings, even earlier in my life, and I had my guy manager with me, many men would look at my guy manager, would not look at me in the eyes and talk to me, right? I'm sure everybody here has faced this at some point. It's the same thing now. The minute you have kids, suddenly, and I don't know how much of this is gender-based, but the same guys that I would meet at events and I would have a business conversation, we would talk about macroeconomics, we would talk about what's happening, what companies to invest in. Now the first question is, how are your kids? And it's lovely, and I'm very happy to talk about my children, but there's a shift. Because now somewhere they see me more as a mother than they do actually in some ways as a business person. Right? There's a shift in their minds. Nothing has changed for me. I'm still happy to talk about macroeconomics, but there is a shift. And I think the automatic assumption is, oh, now you must be stepping back. Oh, now you're letting go. You're not doing so much active stuff, etc. And I happened at the same time to be one of the very few people at 45 who said, I'm going to promote my CEO to MD and I'm going to move myself to an executive chairperson role. Not because I had kids, but because I thought that was best for the business. Now, when a guy does this, he's celebrated and said, oh, so progressive and, you know, how such an amazing delegator. When a woman does it, oh, she anyway wanted to be with her children. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, so on that point, do you think, Ameera, that Indian corporates are even now fundamentally still working with a male-centric career model? Do they still assume that there will be no biological interventions? Are there still any blind spots that leadership still is overlooking at this point?
100%. Like, I think all of our business models assume completely linear working, right? You assume people are going to just keep working. There are going to be no stops in life, no mishaps in life, no pauses in life. And that could be for men as well. I mean, going back to the example I gave, somebody has an accident, they're out of service for 6 months. Somebody has an addiction, they're out of service for 3 months. Or, you know, those of us who choose to have children and that changes your life. For any of the above, it's not a linear working. Your parents fall sick, you have to take care of them. There are so many things that happen. And corporate India or corporate global doesn't allow and structure for that buffer. We assume there's a continuum, so therefore when there is a break, we're like, oh my God, this is too hard to deal with, so it's better not to have women, right? Rather than actually structuring and saying that this percentage of my workforce is going to go through a non-linear cycle, how do I plan for that? How do I introduce a proper structure to re-bring in people who've been out of the workforce? That could be women, it could be somebody else, right? So I think there are certainly things we can do in that.
And that's just what I was going to ask you, that what are perhaps some of these structures doing, whether it's corporate, healthcare, you would know best, being from the healthcare space. I know you've also made some investments in startups like Luma Fertility, which looks into this. You know, what are some of the other things that can be done as an ecosystem to ensure that, that we have the right tools, resources, options, information available to us in order to maneuver these choices?
I mean, I think, look, the reality is that most businesses are still run by men, which is why the conversation has to happen also with men, right? And I think the first starting point is the knowledge and the awareness that businesses perform better with higher gender diversity. That is now a data point proven globally, right? There is enough data pointing to the fact that when governance, when leadership, and when teams are more diverse, and diverse doesn't just mean gender, but diverse across different things, the business performs better. The minute this registers in our brains, we'll automatically start looking for a more diverse workforce. And we're all smart CEOs sitting here. We know how to do that. But the problem is that we haven't registered that data yet, that it leads to better performance. And better performance is not just financially, it's also culturally. It's both, right? You have seen that businesses are more sustainable, businesses are more ethical, businesses are more long-term. Businesses perform 30% better compared to businesses which don't have as much of a gender-driven workforce or as much governance. Once we accept that, there are 50 things we can do to actually make the gender diversity better. And those ones, you know, we all know what they are, right? First, you start with equal pay. Even today, we have different payment for men and women in many companies, right? It's not role-based payment. It's depending on the gender. Even though it's not conscious, it's unconscious. Outcome-driven work. You know, COVID brought about this whole concept of flexibility and hybridness, right? Which was wonderful for women in some ways, but it's gone, right? It's completely gone. Now all CEOs are saying, no, I want everybody in the workforce. Who does it impact? It impacts the women because they are still giving the care to the children, to the elders, to the in-laws, to the parents, to everybody.
Absolutely.
I would like to make hybrid working mandatory, not optional. And it has to be mandatory for the men and the women. Because the minute you make it optional, the men will show up 6 days a week because they're happy to be in the office. The women will not show up 3 days a week, and that automatically becomes the line of division. So I think making a mandatory hybrid is one of the examples.
Absolutely. So on that point, I was going to be coming to it, and one of that point you've already highlighted, hybrid work culture, which actually benefits women more. If all of the CEOs, CXOs sitting here redesigning workplaces, what are the top 2 or 3 policies that you will tell them that must be made mandatory to ensure that women don't have to compromise on ambition and yet can just stay on the path despite all the interventions that they have to go through?
So one, I think over time, and I understand we can't make these changes overnight, and it also depends on the industry. I mean, you're already seeing in knowledge-based industries, hybrid working continues. Many organizations still have 2-3 days a week as a hybrid working option, right? For a lot of Indian companies, that's not a reality. In a company like ours, which is services, it's not an option. I need people physically on the floor to run the tests. I don't have an option to give you a hybrid from working from home. So depending on your sector, I think moving more and more towards hybrid in some sectors and in some small dosage, I think would be important because it creates the flexibility for man or female to give care to whoever they need to give care. Today, as we all know, most of the burden of care is on the woman, and then she will take help from the man, right? It's certainly not equal, it's certainly not divided, it's certainly not in any of those formats. So how do you create moments of time where the man also has time off to do the same? So that's one. Second, I think, is if we can structure the re-entry into the workspace. I think this is such a gaping hole today where women choose to take a year off, 2 years off, 3 years off. As we know, child till 5 is the most important development time for a child.
So on that, and since we're almost out of time, I want to get a closing comment from you on, as somebody who's weighed up these choices in different stages and experienced things at different phases in life, what would you say there's an ideal? And I know this is again sensitive because people would look at it in different ways, but is there an ideal for somebody who's ambitious, looking to grow in the workforce, to say, I'm going to make that decision to go on the motherhood journey at this age or at that stage of, of their growth?
Look, there is no ideal, but I can only tell you, a lot of people look at me. I had my child at 40. I had my twins at 44, right? And a lot of people say, oh my God, so late. And yes, it was late compared to the norm. But it was wonderful for me because it gave me the age of 20. I started my business when I was 20, 21, till the age of 40 to just focus on building my business. But I didn't do this mindlessly saying that, oh, when I become a mother, then we'll see. I planned for it. I created the backup that when I want to become a parent, I have my embryos, I have the eggs to do it, right? So I think if we value the emotional, spiritual side of life, because I believe children, family, love, all comes into that. You value the financial, professional, intellectual side of life. I think you really can have it all, assuming there's no medical challenge. And I think then it's about balancing it and prioritizing it, but planning it. And that's what egg freezing, IVF, and all of these options give us today.
I think that's an amazing note to end on. Thank you so much, Ameera Shah, everybody. Big round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.